He's economy, Daniel laughed, pointing at me in front of his wife, the gate agent, and my grandson. We're first class. He probably used miles. Then Jessica waved over airport staff to keep me from following them on board. I stood frozen, heart thudding, while my grandson looked back confused, clutching his boarding pass. I had saved up those miles for 20 years, for this one trip. I was humiliated, until I saw the gate agent pull Daniel aside, her smile gone. She tapped something on her screen. His credit card had triggered a fraud flag. The plane hadn't even left the ground yet, but when it landed, he'd lose everything, and I'd be seated right next to the one person who still saw me as family. My name is Walter Caldwell, and I'm 75 years old. From sunrise to sunset, I repair antique clocks in my small workshop behind the house, where brass polish and rose soap mingle in the air. My son Daniel, once my eager apprentice, now runs a shipping empire with his wife Jessica, treating our history like a footnote best forgotten. My grandson Tommy, their only child, sends drawings that never quite reach my refrigerator door. I've tracked airline miles in a leather ledger for 20 years, and my old Air Force friend Robert still answers my calls day or night. The ticking of 100 timepieces fills my evenings, as passenger jets draw white lines across the sky. These days, when Daniel calls, my hands steady on the workbench. The patience of a craftsman has its limits. But let me start from the beginning. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was polishing a brass pendulum at my kitchen table. I'd just finished my ham sandwich when Daniel's name lit up my phone screen. My heart did that little skip it always does. Hope mixing with history. "Dad," he said, and I could hear the cocktail hour satisfaction in his voice. "We're going to Paris next month. 2 weeks at the George Fiers." Tommy's so excited to see the Eiffel Tower. The pendulum caught the afternoon light as I turned it. "Paris? That sounds wonderful. I've always wanted to—" "That's why I'm calling, actually." Daniel's laugh crackled through the speaker. "You're too poor to travel with us, Dad. I mean, let's be honest. The places we stay, the restaurants, it wouldn't work. You understand, right?" My hand froze mid-polish. The brass grew cold against my palm. "Oh, honey, is that your father?" Jessica's voice chimed in from somewhere behind him. "Tell him about my new Louis Vuitton collection. The matching set for Paris just arrived." 8 pieces, Daniel added proudly. "Custom ordered. Jessica knows how to travel in style." My stomach knotted tight as their laughter mingled. I thought of Tommy's drawings of airplanes, always with extra seats sketched in. You know that feeling when shame and yearning crash together? Like that. "Well," I managed, "I hope you all have a wonderful— gotta run, Dad. Board meeting. We'll send postcards." The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, that polished pendulum catching light and shadow. Then something shifted in me. Call it dignity finding its feet. I crossed to my bedroom closet and pulled down an old leather ledger from the top shelf. 20 years of tracking airline miles from my credit card purchases, small amounts mostly, clock parts and grocery runs, but time adds up. That's something you learn in my line of work. My hands were steady as I dialed the airline's number. The agent sounded bored until I mentioned award travel to Paris. "Oh yes, we have economy availability on those dates," she said. "It would be 60,000 miles round trip." I glanced at my total, 63,542 miles. "I'll take it." 10 minutes later, the confirmation email arrived. No fanfare, no fuss, just a simple economy ticket that would put me on the same flight as my son's family. That evening, I laid out my travel clothes with the same care I use for clock components. My navy blazer, freshly pressed, the brown leather shoes I'd cleaned and polished last Sunday, and my passport, still in its envelope labeled Walter Caldwell, in careful block letters I'd written decades ago. Before bed, I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m., early enough to double-check everything. In my pocket notebook, the one where I track repair jobs, I wrote a single line: "Board first, speak last." The booking confirmation glowed on my phone screen in the darkness, like a dare Daniel couldn't hear. Would the plan hold at the gate? That question ticked away as I drifted off, surrounded by the gentle rhythm of my workshop clocks. I've always believed the airport before dawn has its own kind of quiet, like a church, but with more fluorescent lights and rolling suitcases. At 4:30 that morning, My workshop alarm hadn't even finished its first ring before my hand found the switch. You develop quick reflexes when precision matters. The single carry-on I'd packed sat by my door, everything measured out, like parts for a complicated repair job. 1 blazer, 3 shirts, basic toiletries. My itinerary was folded into crisp thirds, tucked in my breast pocket where I could feel its edge against my heart. You ever notice how the world feels different when you're carrying a secret? Like you're walking through familiar rooms, but the lights change somehow. The taxi driver didn't talk much, just nodded at my single bag and kept his eyes on the empty streets. The eastern sky was starting to show that first hint of grey when we pulled up to departures. I paid him with exact change. Old habits die hard. Inside, the check-in area hummed with that pre-dawn energy of people heading somewhere important. I joined the economy line, my boarding pass already printed at home. The agent smiled, checked my ID, and tagged my bag straight through to Paris. Her fingers moved with that early morning efficiency I recognized from my own work. "Have a good flight, Mr. Caldwell." Security was a well-oiled machine at this hour. I'd practiced this part in my mind. Shoes off, belt off, pockets empty. The TSA agent barely glanced at my passport. All those hours adjusting tiny gears had taught me patience. You can't rush precision and you can't fake calm. While I retied my shoes, I rehearsed what I'd say when I saw Daniel. "Good morning. Have a safe flight." Simple. Nothing asked, nothing offered. Just acknowledgement like marking time. The gate area was filling up as I found a seat near the window. First class would board first, of course. I knew Daniel's routine from the photos Jessica posted online. Arrive late, make an entrance. Some people treat time like it's their servant instead of everyone's master. I was right. 20 minutes before boarding, they swept in, Daniel leading the parade with Tommy bouncing alongside, Jessica cataloguing everything with her phone camera. 3 cartloads of matching designer luggage, a porter trailing behind. The gate agent jumped to attention. Money has that effect on people. "First-class passengers may now board through the priority lane," the announcement crackled. Daniel's family rose like royalty. I stayed seated, watching Tommy's excited little dance. My grandson's joy was pure, untainted by his parents' performance. When they called Group 3, I stood. My boarding pass felt warm in my hand, those saved-up miles finally finding their purpose. That's when Daniel saw me. Have you ever seen someone's face change from confident to furious in the space of a heartbeat? His stare hit me like a physical thing. I'd seen that look before, the day I couldn't afford to invest in his first business venture. The day he decided I wasn't worth his time. The scanner's green light blinked as my boarding pass was accepted. Through the glass partition, I caught Daniel's expression shifting from shock to that familiar sneer, the one that said I didn't belong in his world, the one that probably practiced itself in mirrors. I didn't meet his eyes. 20 years of repairing delicate mechanisms had taught me, when parts are under tension, the slightest wrong move can break everything. Instead, I walked steadily down the jet bridge, my carry-on's wheels marking time behind me. Row 23, seat A window. The safety card in the pocket ahead of me was crisp, unused. I buckled in, adjusted the air vent, and felt the gentle vibration of the engines starting their morning warm-up. The cabin filled around me with the usual symphony of stowed bags and murmured conversations. Then footsteps in the aisle. Heavy ones, purposeful. A shadow fell across my shoulder. The wheels touched down in Paris just as the morning sun caught the city's edges. Funny how crossing an ocean can leave you feeling both exhausted and wide awake at the same time. I'd dozed off somewhere over the Atlantic, dreaming of Tommy's laugh from when he was little and used to visit my workshop. The terminal at Charles de Gaulle was all glass and steel, nothing like the cozy confines of my repair shop. I followed the signs to baggage claim, my carry-on trailing behind me like a faithful dog. The customs officer barely glanced at my passport before waving me through. You know that moment when you're in a new place and everything feels slightly off-kilter, like the air itself is different. That's how Paris felt to me. I found the train station beneath the airport easily enough. Years of reading repair manuals had made me good at following diagrams. The ticket machine switched to English with a touch, and soon I was sitting on the RER B line heading into the heart of the city. The seats were worn but clean, just like my little inn would be. The Place d'Italie neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it had character. My inn sat wedged between a bakery and a bookshop, its blue shutters needing a fresh coat of paint. Inside, the lobby smelled of coffee and floor wax, with a hint of yesterday's bread from next door. The clerk's English was better than my non-existent French, and she handed me a key attached to a heavy brass fob that reminded me of the old clock weights in my shop. My room was simple. Single bed, desk, window overlooking a courtyard where pigeons strutted like they owned the place. I unpacked my blazer and hung it in the narrow closet, smoothing out the travel wrinkles best I could. The rain started as I typed out the text to Daniel. Arrived. Safely. Would love to take Tommy for a walk along the Seine this afternoon. Your choice of time. I kept it light, casual. No mention of the airport. No hint of tension. I waited at the Pont Neuf kiosk, watching tourists huddle under umbrellas while water beaded on my own borrowed one from the inn stand. The Seine flowed grey beneath the bridge, steady as time itself. My phone stayed silent except for weather alerts. After 2 hours, I gave up. On the bridge and made my way to Daniel's address, one of those cream-colored buildings with wrought-iron balconies and doormen who looked like they moonlighted as fashion models. The elevator was all mirrors and brass, reflecting my travel-worn image back at me from every angle. Jessica answered the door, designer dress and perfect makeup, making me suddenly aware of every crease in my blazer. Her eyes did that up and down thing she's so good at, like she was appraising a yard sale item. Not dressed like that, she said, managing to make 4 words sound like a complete conviction. We have standards here, Walter. Tommy has friends whose parents are... Well, she let the sentence hang there like badly hung wallpaper. The door closed with a soft click that might as well have been a slam. My chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and scooped everything out. My mouth was dessert dry. As I rode the elevator back down, past all those mirrors showing me exactly what Jessica saw. There was a street vendor selling scarves near the metro station. I bought a cheap one, navy blue with tiny dots that almost matched my tie. In the window reflection of a cafe, I re-knotted everything, trying to meet those standards Jessica had mentioned. Back at the inn, twilight was pooling in the courtyard like spilled ink. The pigeons had gone, wherever pigeons go at night, leaving the stones empty. I sat at the small desk and pulled out my notebook, the same one I used to track clock repairs back home. Under today's date, I wrote, "Do not beg, do not bite." My phone buzzed. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest like a trapped bird. But it was just a notification, my unread message count dropping to 0. Daniel had cleared his inbox without bothering to reply. I set the phone face down, on the desk. Through the thin walls, I could hear someone's TV playing what sounded like a French game show. The laugh track felt like it was mocking my whole situation. The next morning, I plotted my route across Paris using a tourist map from the front desk. You ever try to fold one of those things back up properly? It's like trying to put a clock back together with your eyes closed. The bus system looked simple enough on paper, but each transfer felt like throwing money into a wishing well that wasn't listening. I spotted them first at the Trocadero, Daniel, Jessica, and Tommy posing for photos with the Eiffel Tower as their backdrop. They had a professional photographer with them, the kind that probably charged more for an hour than I made in a week. Daniel kept raising his champagne glass between shots, toasting the air like he'd just won an award for existing. You know that feeling when you're watching someone through a window and they're having the time of their life while you're standing out in the cold. That's what it felt like. Tommy was wearing a little suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He looked uncomfortable in it, tugging at the collar when his parents weren't watching. I tried again at their hotel's brunch spot, one of those places where the menu doesn't even bother listing prices. Daniel saw me coming from across the marble lobby. "Dad," he said, not getting up from his table, "this is really not the time. We have reservations with the Andersons." His smirk said he knew exactly how much those reservations meant to exclude me. The afternoon brought another try at the Louvre. I'd saved up enough euros for the ticket, figured art was neutral ground. But there was Daniel again, this time playing tour guide to some business, associates. "Oh, look who it is," he announced loudly as I approached. "Dad's doing his budget tour of Europe." His friends laughed like it was the cleverest thing they'd heard all day. I watched my grandson stare at his shoes, cheeks red with second-hand embarrassment. Back at my inn, dinner was soup and bread in the small dining room. The soup was thin, mostly broth, but I couldn't complain. My wallet was getting just as thin. Remember those old Air Force days when we'd make a meal out of whatever was left in the mess hall? This felt like that, only lonelier. The innkeeper, Marie was her name, was talking to another guest about flight schedules, something about late bookings and travel agents. It hit me like a hammer striking a bell. Robert, my old wingman from Korea who'd gone into the travel business after his discharge, hadn't he mentioned something about corporate accounts last Christmas? I stepped out into the courtyard, where the evening air smelled of rain and cigarettes. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I scrolled to Robert's number. 3 rings, then that familiar gravelly voice. Walt, this is a surprise. Aren't you usually elbow deep in gears this time of day? I'm in Paris, I said, keeping my voice low. Following Daniel and his family, it's not going well. The golden boy giving you trouble? Robert knew all about Daniel's rise and my fall from his grace. I laid it out for him. The airport humiliation, the blocked visits, each cutting dismissal. My voice stayed steady, like reporting mechanical problems during pre-flight checks. Just need your perspective, Bob. You've seen how these fancy trips work. Robert was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, there was something new in his voice, like he'd spotted something interesting through his gun sight. Come by tomorrow morning, he said. Bring whatever booking details you've got on their trip, might be educational. I looked at my phone screen after hanging up. The black glass reflected my face, lined with fatigue but eyes sharp as ever. The clock at the top read 17. The next morning I found Robert's office tucked into a side street near the opera. You ever notice how some places feel frozen in time? His workspace was like stepping back into our squadron's ready room. All business, no frills. Route maps and airline policies covered the walls like battlefield plans, and through the window I watched taxis queue up like planes waiting for clearance. Still running on military time, I see, Robert said, checking his watch as I walked in at exactly 0900. He hadn't changed much since Korea, same squared shoulders, same way of sizing up a situation like he was checking for mechanical failures. I laid everything out on his desk. The printed itinerary I'd grabbed from Daniel's assistant's printer when she wasn't looking, confirmation emails I'd forwarded to myself, and photos I'd taken of their luxury parade through Paris. Even had shots of the hotel letterhead and some receipts I'd managed to spot. Let's see what we've got here, Robert mumbled, fingers dancing across his keyboard. The computer's glow reflected off his reading glasses as he cross-referenced carrier records and fare classes. You know that silence in the cockpit, right before someone spots trouble? That's what it felt like watching him work. Walt, he said after a while, these aren't standard bookings. His brow furrowed deeper with each new screen. First class, premier suites, private transfers. We're talking serious money here. My hands were steady on the armrests. They always were when things got serious. Daniel's done well for himself, I said, but Robert was already shaking his head. No, look at this. He turned the monitor toward me. See these numbers? This coding here? He pointed to a string of characters embedded in the booking metadata. That's a corporate profile, GT Solutions. Ring any bells? His employer, I said, and suddenly the room felt like it was banking hard to port. Are you saying these bookings weren't made with personal funds, Walt? This is all corporate money. Family vacation on the company dime. Robert leaned back, letting that sink in. And from what I'm seeing, it's not the first time. I gripped the chair's arms tighter, feeling that old tactical mindset click into place, the one that got me through dozens of emergency landings. What matters here, Bob? What do we need to prove it? Robert started pulling files up faster now. Booking codes, payment records, passenger manifests. It's all here in the system. Your boy's been sloppy, probably thought nobody was watching. He glanced at me. Nobody was, until now. And timing? I asked, my voice as level as when I used to call in coordinates. That's the tricky part. Robert tapped his desk calendar. There's a window here, but it's narrow. The company's fiscal quarter ends next week. If something were to come to light, he let the thought hang there like a live wire. I need details, I said, standing up. Everything you can get me. Come back tomorrow morning. Same time. Robert was already scribbling notes. I'll have it all laid out. What to send, where to send it, when to pull the trigger. Looking down at the scattered evidence of Daniel's betrayal, not just of me, but of the trust his company had placed in him, I felt something shift inside. Not anger, exactly. More like the calm certainty of a mechanic who's finally found the broken gear that's been throwing off the whole machine. You know what this could mean for him? Robert asked quietly. I nodded. The same way I used to nod when checking off pre-flight procedures, each action considered, each consequence understood. Get some rest, Walt, Robert said as I headed for the door. Tomorrow we plan the approach. The morning sun hit the taxi queue outside, making the cars gleam like fighters lined up on a runway. I thought about Daniel in his penthouse suite, probably ordering another bottle of champagne on his company card, never suspecting that his father, the one he dismissed as too poor to matter, was about to become the most expensive problem he'd ever had. The next morning I walked into Robert's office carrying a leather portfolio I hadn't touched since retiring from the Air Force. Inside, everything was arranged just so. Maintenance habits die hard when you've spent decades keeping aircraft logs. You ever notice how the right paperwork feels like ammunition when you're preparing to fight back? Right on time, Robert said, not looking up from his computer. His desk had transformed overnight into something between a war room and an auditor's paradise. 3 monitors glowed with spreadsheets, and a printer hummed steadily in the corner. I laid out my documentation in neat rows: flight manifests, hotel confirmations, transfer receipts, all marked with sticky tabs in different colors. Got timestamps on most of these, I said, tapping a particularly damning photo of Daniel toasting with vintage champagne in the first-class lounge. And look here. I slid forward a series of screenshots from his wife's social media. She's been kind enough to document every luxury moment. Robert picked up a corporate policy manual he'd pulled from somewhere. GT Solutions has strict rules about personal use of company funds. Family travel's explicitly prohibited unless it's for a sanctioned event. He looked at me over his reading glasses. I don't see any business conferences in these photos, Walt. Just my son playing emperor with someone else's money, I said, my voice steady as a clock's tick. For the next hour, Robert drafted what he called a compliance report. I watched him build it piece by piece. Fare basis codes that proved first-class bookings, corporate account IDs that linked to GT Solutions, passenger manifests showing Daniel's wife and kid listed as business associates. Every detail mattered, like calibrating a delicate timepiece. The real key is the return flight, Robert said, circling a date on his desktop calendar. 7 days from now, when they try to check in, the system will ping their corporate card for final authorization. That's our moment. Why then? Because airports are public stages, Walt. When that card gets declined, and it will get declined, everyone will see it happen. Security, other passengers, airline staff. No hiding it, no quick fix, no calling in favors. He leaned back. The system will do exactly what it's designed to do. Made sense to me. Systems were reliable that way. Whether they were mechanical or procedural. What do you need from me? I asked. Robert slid a formal-looking document across the desk. Witness statement, names, dates, times you observed the misuse. Sign here and here. He pointed to marked lines at the bottom. I'll attach the evidence files and route it through the proper channels. Airline Fraud Department, Corporate Compliance Office. My hand didn't shake as I signed. Funny how steady you can be when you're absolutely certain about what needs doing. Your part's simple now, Robert said, gathering the papers. Be visible when they show up for the return flight. Let them see you. Let them know you were there all along. The systems will handle the rest. I nodded, thinking of all those years keeping aircraft maintenance logs. One wrong entry, one missed check, and things fell apart at 30,000 feet. Daniel never understood that kind of precision, that responsibility. Maybe now he would. Robert turned to his calendar and drew a bold red circle around the departure date. 7 days to departure, Walt, he said, tapping the marked date with his pen. Every hour matters now. Looking at that circled date, I felt the same focus I used to get before complex repairs, when every gear and spring had to align just right. Only this time I wasn't on fixing a clock. I was making sure time finally caught up with my son. The countdown starts now, Robert said, and I heard the quiet certainty in his voice, the kind that comes from knowing exactly how things are going to play out, tick by mechanical tick. Ever notice how hope feels heavier when you're carrying it alone? The morning after filing the report, I walked to a small park near Daniel's penthouse. My pocket held a metal toy plane I'd found in a shop window, the kind I used to fix during the war, scaled down to fit in a child's hand. Under my arm, I carried a sketchbook filled with clock drawings I thought my grandson might like. The park benches were still damp from an early drizzle. I chose one facing the playground and settled in, watching parents with their children. The toy plane's weight pressed against my hip, a small comfort as I waited. Remember those moments when you're absolutely certain you're in the right place, just at the wrong time? That's how it felt sitting there with my simple gifts and simpler hopes. Around 10, I spotted them. Daniel steering my grandson toward the swings, his wife trailing behind with her phone up for photos. My hands steadied as I stood, smoothing my blazer more from habit than need. "Good morning," I called out, soft enough not to startle, but firm enough to be heard. Daniel's head snapped up. His face did that thing, that instant shift from public smile to private sneer I'd grown too familiar with. "Dad," he said, like he was reading a stranger's name tag. "What are you doing here?" I held up the sketchbook. Thought Tommy might like to see some drawings, maybe play a bit. The toy plane felt suddenly childish in my pocket, but I pressed on. "It's a nice morning for—" "We have reservations," Daniel cut in. His hand tightened on Tommy's shoulder. "At a proper restaurant, you understand?" The way he said proper made my throat tighten. Funny how some words can cut deeper than others, isn't it? "Just 15 minutes, I tried, but they were already turning away. Tommy glanced back once, a quick confused look that hurt worse than Daniel's dismissal. I sat back down, the sketchbook heavy in my lap. A young mother on the next bench offered a sympathetic smile. "Rough morning?" "Just poor timing," I said, though we both knew that wasn't true. Back at the inn, I laid out my remaining euros on the bed, counting what was left for the week ahead. The thought of booking an early flight home crept in, whispering that it would be easier to disappear back into my quiet shop with my quiet clocks. Why stay where I wasn't wanted? My phone buzzed. An email from Robert. Below that was a string of official-looking receipt numbers. Simple things, really, just digits in a system. But they felt solid, like the brass gears I worked with every day, each one clicking into place, turning the next. I opened my suitcase and began organizing what I had left. 5 clean shirts, enough socks, the pressed slacks I'd saved for nicer dinners. No need to rush home. No need to run. The rest of the day, I kept to my routine. Coffee at the corner cafe where the owner had started recognizing me. A slow walk along the Seine, watching tourist boats glide past. Careful spending from my dwindling cash, just enough for modest meals and metro tickets. That evening, I wrote a postcard to Tommy. Nothing fancy, just that I loved him and hoped to see him soon. No mention of Daniel, no hint of hurt. Just grandfather to grandson. I left it at the penthouse desk on my way back to the inn. The sun was setting when another email came through. Corporate auto-response this time. Priority level. High current phase. Active review. I read it twice, letting each word settle. Then I put the phone away and opened my notebook, the one where I'd been tracking every slight, every dismissal since we landed. Not for anger's sake, but for memories, because sometimes justice needs a clear record to work from. Outside my window, Paris was lighting up for the night. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably raising another expensive toast, never suspecting that systems larger than his ego were already in motion. I thought about Tommy's confused look at the park, about the toy plane still in my pocket, about patience and its limits. The case was moving forward. That would have to be enough for now. 5 days before departure, I sat cross-legged on my inn bed with my return ticket spread before me, checked and double-checked every detail, seat assignment, boarding time, confirmation number. All clean and proper, paid with my own miles, not a corporate dime in sight. Funny how something as simple as a valid ticket can feel like armor. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery below drifted up through my open window, mixing with the morning traffic sounds. It reminded me of dawn shifts at the airbase, that same mix of purpose and possibility in the air. I tucked the ticket into its envelope, marked valid in careful block letters across the top. 4 days out, I practiced what Robert called tactical silence, found a quiet corner of Luxembourg Gardens and watched how other people handled confrontation. A teenager getting scolded by his mother caught my eye, the way he kept his face neutral, letting her words wash past without leaving a mark. That's what I needed. That same still water surface that gives nothing back. The right kind of silence speaks volumes, I muttered to myself, testing the words. and dignity doesn't need to shout. 3 days left, and I worked on my posture. Stood in front of the inn's full-length mirror, adjusting my blazer until it sat just right. Practiced walking past imaginary sneers with my shoulders straight but not stiff. You'd be surprised how much strength you can draw from simply standing properly. Remember those old military bearing drills? They came in handy now, though I never thought I'd need them for facing down my own son. Robert met me at his office 2 days before departure. The walls seemed closer this time, route maps and airline policies pressing in like silent witnesses. We walked through the sequence step by step: check-in, security, passport control, gate scanning. Daniel might try to swap cards, Robert said, shuffling through our documentation. But it won't matter. The whole trip's already locked to the corporate account. Every hotel night, every car service, every upgrade. The paper trail's solid as concrete. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all. And the timing? The system will flag it the moment they scan his boarding pass. Clean, professional, by the book. Robert tapped the schedule we'd laid out. You just focus on being visible. Let the process work. On my way back to the inn, I passed a small stationery shop. Something in the window caught my eye. A leather-bound travel journal, deep brown with cream pages. Not expensive, just well-made. The kind of thing you'd want to fill with better memories than these. The shopkeeper wrapped it carefully in brown paper. For your next adventure, yes? Yes, I said, and meant it, because there would be next times, better times. This journal would hold those stories instead. The night before departure, I laid everything out on the bed, pressed blazer, polished shoes, travel documents in order, each piece in its place like clock parts waiting for assembly. Even set out my morning coffee cup. Small routines matter when big moments loom. My phone buzzed just as I was turning in. Robert's message lit up the room. Revocation processed. Effect triggers at airport systems on departure. Switched off the phone and sat in the dark for a minute, listening to Paris wind down outside my window. Somewhere across town, Daniel was probably packing designer luggage, still certain his world would keep spinning exactly as he'd arranged it. The journal sat on my nightstand, its blank pages a quiet promise. Whatever happened tomorrow, I'd have new stories to write, different ones, better ones. I set my alarm and closed my eyes, ready for whatever the morning would bring. I arrived at Charles de Gaulle while the morning sun was still climbing, 3 hours early, a habit from my Air Force days that never quite left me. Found a seat near security with a clear view of the whole show about to unfold. You know that feeling when you're wound up tight inside but need to look calm on the outside? That was me, sitting there with my carry-on tucked neat beneath my chair. The morning crowd ebbed and flowed, business types with their efficient routines, families herding sleepy kids. Each scanning beep and printer whir felt like a countdown timer. My hands wanted to fidget, but I kept them still on my knees. Just like working on those delicate clock movements. Steady does it. Going to be quite a show, I muttered under my breath, though no one was close enough to hear. The smell of airport coffee drifted past, mixing with cleaning. Solution. And that particular tension in the air when hundreds of people are all trying to get somewhere else reminded me of base operations during alert drills, that same electric waiting. At exactly 2 hours before departure, Daniel made his entrance. You should have seen him stride in like he owned every tile he stepped on. 3 rolling cases of what I'm sure was matched designer luggage, his wife already doing her social media routine with, her phone held high. Darling, tell them where we're heading. She had that voice that carries whether you want it to or not. Daniel flashed what I call his photographer smile, all teeth and no warmth. Back to reality after our little Paris adventure. First class all the way, naturally. I watched them approach the check-in counter, keeping my breathing even. Daniel slid their passports across like playing cards in a winning hand. His wife was still narrating to her phone, something about luxury travel tips. The first hint came when the agent's fingers paused over her keyboard. Just a small hesitation, but I'd been watching for it. She frowned at her screen, tapped a few more keys. "1 moment, sir," she said, and that's when I knew it was starting. The agent called over a colleague, speaking in low French. They both studied the screen. Daniel's smile started to slip around the edges. "Is there a problem?" He used his boardroom voice, the one meant to make problems disappear. A third agent joined them, this one wearing a supervisor's badge, more murmuring, more frowning at screens. The queue behind them started to back up. I held my boarding pass in both hands like steadying a compass in rough seas, kept my eyes forward, face neutral, just another passenger waiting his turn, but I caught every detail of what was unfolding. "Sir, there appears to be an issue with the payment method," the supervisor said, loud enough to carry. Daniel's voice rose sharply. "That's impossible. Run it again." People 2 rope lines back were starting to notice that ripple of attention when something's going wrong at an airport counter. Phones came up recording the scene. His wife had stopped her narration, finally reading the room. "Sir, I'm showing a corporate account revocation. Flag," the supervisor continued. "We'll need to—" "Do you know who I am?" Daniel cut in, color rising in his face. "Just call my office. They'll sort this out immediately." That's when 2 security officers appeared, moving with that purposeful airport walk that means business. Blue uniforms, badges catching the overhead lights. "Mr. Caldwell?" One of them stepped forward. "Would you please step aside with us for a moment?" Daniel's performance grin vanished completely. "This is ridiculous. I'm a premium customer." "Sir," the second officer gestured firmly toward a side area. "This way, please." I watched my son's face as reality started to sink in. His wife had gone very quiet. Her phone finally lowered. The crowd's whispers grew louder. The security officers moved in closer, one on each side of Daniel. Their faces had that professional blank look that says, "This won't be a quick conversation." I sat very still in my chair, boarding pass steady in my hands as they led him away from the counter. You ever notice how a crowd can sense when something bigger than a regular delay is unfolding? The waiting area had that feeling now, everyone pretending not to watch while watching everything. "Sir, if you'll just have a seat here." The security officer gestured to a row of chairs near a curved desk with an airline logo. Daniel's wife trailed behind them, her designer heels clicking softly on the tile. I shifted in my seat to keep them in view without being obvious about it. Years of fixing clocks teaches you patience and timing. This moment had been ticking toward us for days. A woman in a crisp airline uniform approached, tablet in hand. Her badge said Senior Operations Manager, and she had that careful way of moving that meant she dealt with difficult situations for a living. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, her tone professionally neutral, "I need to discuss your booking status." Daniel tried his executive stance, shoulders back, chin up. "This is clearly some sort of system error. My office handles all our travel arrangements." The manager swiped through screens on her tablet. "I'm showing that the corporate payment source for this itinerary has been revoked." She turned the display so Daniel could see it. "All associated bookings are now flagged." That's when I saw it. That flush of red creeping up Daniel's neck like a tide gauge of panic. His wife clutched her phone, whispering, "Should I call Jeremy in accounting? Or maybe Lisa in legal?" Around us, other passengers weren't even pretending anymore. Some had their phones out, probably live posting the whole thing. Know what's funny about karma? Sometimes it brings its own audience. "One moment," the hike manager said, tapping her tablet. A video call connected, showing someone in what looked like a corporate office. "I have our fraud prevention investigator on the line." The investigator's voice came through clearly in the hushed space. "Mr. Caldwell, can you verify your authorization level for the corporate travel account ending in 4721? Daniel's answer came out strained. "Of course I'm authorized. I'm a senior vice president. And the passenger manifest includes family members." The investigator's tone could have chilled wine. "Can you confirm the company's policy on personal use of corporate funds?" Someone nearby whispered. "Oh, snap." Others were shaking their heads, that universal gesture of glad that's not me. Daniel's wife tried swiping her own credit card at the counter. The agent ran it twice, but the booking was locked to the corporate payment. Each declined beep felt like another nail being driven home. "The entire itinerary is flagged," the manager explained. "We can't override these holds once they're activated." I watched my son's carefully built facade crumble in real time. His wife had stopped trying to record their luxury travel moments and was now frantically texting, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the screen. A second security officer joined the first, this one wearing a blazer with an airport authority badge. "Mr. Caldwell, we need to continue this discussion in private. Please come with us." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "This is absurd. I demand to speak to—" "Sir," the blazered officer cut in. "This way, please." He gestured toward a frosted glass door marked Private Consultations. As they guided Daniel away, The investigator's voice followed them. Our fraud team will contact you directly to discuss the unauthorized charges. That last bit landed like a judge's gavel in the terminal's artificial hush. Several passengers winced. There's something about the word fraud that makes everyone uncomfortable. I stayed in my seat, hands folded over my boarding pass, looking for all the world like just another traveler waiting for his flight. But inside, I was remembering every dismissive word, every condescending look, every time he'd made me feel small. Daniel glanced back once before they led him through that frosted door. For just a moment our eyes met. I gave him the same bland, polite smile he'd given me so many times before. When they called final boarding, I stood slowly, straightening my blazer. No need to rush now, everything that mattered had already happened. You know how time feels different when you're watching something big unfold? Like that moment when you finally get all the gears lined up in a complex clock, and you just need to let them turn. I was halfway to the gate when I felt it, a small hand slipping into mine, warm and trusting. Looking down, I found my grandson Tommy standing there, clutching his boarding pass in his other hand, and staring up at me with those big brown eyes of his. His mother was nowhere in sight, probably still trying to sort out their tangled mess at the security desk. "Grandpa," he whispered like we were sharing a secret, "can I sit with you?" Something in my chest tightened, but in a good way, like when you find that one tiny part you've been searching for, and suddenly everything makes sense again. A flight attendant noticed us. Young woman couldn't have been more than 30, with a kind smile that reminded me of my late wife's. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, glancing between us. I showed her both our boarding passes. My grandson and I were hoping to sit together if possible. My voice stayed steady, professional. Years of dealing with customers teaches you that courtesy often opens doors that demands can't. She checked her tablet, tapped a few times and nodded. "No problem at all, sir, we can arrange that." She looked at Tommy. "Would you like a window seat, young man?" Tommy's face lit up like a clock face when you first restore its glow. "Can I, Grandpa?" "Of course you can, buddy." I squeezed his hand gently. Funny how some moments feel both brand new and somehow exactly right, isn't they? The attendant walked us down the jet bridge herself, making sure we found our seats without any fuss. Tommy bounced a little as he climbed in by the window, pressing his nose against the glass like he was trying to memorize every detail of the tarmac below. I settled into my seat, adjusting my collar, and making sure my carry-on was properly stowed. The cabin crew started their final checks, and I heard the distinctive thunk of the main door closing. Somewhere back in the terminal, Daniel was still dealing with those investigators and their mounting questions. But that wasn't my concern anymore. Remember that travel journal I'd bought from the street vendor? I pulled it out now, its fresh pages crisp and full of possibility. On the first page, I wrote the date and Paris honestly as a title. Below that, just 3 simple words. I was present. Tommy tugged at my sleeve. "Look, Grandpa, the lights look like a necklace." He was right. The runway lights were sliding past our window like beads on a string, each one bright and precise in the gathering dusk. I watched them with him, feeling the gentle rumble as we picked up speed. The engines rose to a steady roar, and I felt that familiar pressure pushing me back into my seat. Tommy grabbed my hand again as the nose lifted, and just like that, we were airborne. The wheels tucked up beneath us, and Paris began to shrink away below. All those hours in my workshop, all those years of careful movements and patient repairs, had taught me something important. Sometimes fixing things means letting them come apart first, so you can rebuild them properly. As we climbed into the darkening sky, I felt as steady as any timepiece I'd ever restored. Tommy was already reaching for the entertainment screen, but he paused to give me a quick smile. "I'm glad you're here, Grandpa." I patted his hand and watched the city lights spread out below us like scattered stars. The time for consequences would come soon enough. For now, we had an ocean to cross and a story to begin, honestly this time. The seatbelt sign had barely dimmed when my phone buzzed with the first message. You know that moment when you're working on a clock and everything finally clicks into perfect alignment? This was like that, but with justice instead of gears. The airline's fraud department had already filed their report. Corporate compliance wasn't far behind. The messages kept coming, each one another piece falling into place. Investigation initiated. Reimbursement protocols activated. Legal team engaged. Clear, direct, final. like the strike of a well-tuned bell. I glanced at my phone's screen one last time before tucking it away. The numbers were staggering. First-class upgrades, luxury hotel stays, private car services, all charged to company accounts. You ever watch someone build a house of cards knowing a breeze is coming? That's what Daniel's empire had been all along. Tommy shifted in his sleep, his head heavy against my shoulder. Reminded me of when Daniel was that age, back when trust was something freely given, not carefully measured. The cabin's steady hum wrapped around us like a blanket, smoothing out years of ragged breaths I hadn't even noticed I was taking. "Would you like a blanket for him, sir?" a flight attendant whispered, already reaching for one. "That'd be nice, thank you." I helped her tuck it around Tommy without waking him. The simple act felt right in a way that all Daniel's grand gestures never had. You see, I'd watched my son swagger through that airport like he owned it, talking loud into his phone about some merger or acquisition. But pride isn't measured in decibels. It's measured in dignity. And dignity, that's something you earn through honest work and straight dealing. The last message that came through painted the full picture of what awaited Daniel. The company would demand every penny back with interest. Legal consequences would follow. Fraud isn't something corporations take lightly. But maybe worse for a man like Daniel would be the whispers, the sideways glances, the social media posts from witnesses who'd seen him escorted away from that gate in Paris. Remember what I said about time repaying disrespect with interest? Well, the bill had come due. Tommy stirred slightly, mumbling something about clouds in his sleep. I reached into my carry-on and pulled out that small travel journal I'd bought in Paris. Its leather cover was smooth under my fingers, its pages still crisp and full of possibility. Not just a notebook anymore, more like a passport to whatever came next. The captain announced our final descent. As the plane banked, morning light streamed through the windows, painting everything in clean, honest gold. Tommy woke up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and smiling when he saw me. "Are we home, Grandpa?" "Almost, buddy, almost." When the plane finally came to a stop and the seatbelt sign dinged off, I stood up straight, the way I used to stand in my Air Force days. Amazing how familiar that feeling was, like putting on a well-kept uniform. I helped Tommy with his backpack, then picked up my travel journal and stepped into the aisle. Walking up that jet bridge, I felt every one of my 75 years, but not as a burden, more like layers of hard-earned wisdom. Each step carried the steady weight of a man who knows exactly who he is. Just before we entered the terminal, I paused by one of those big windows overlooking the runway. The morning sun caught the plane's wings, making them shine like polished brass. Tommy had already spotted his mother waiting by baggage claim, but I needed this moment. I touched the spine of my travel journal, thinking about all the blank pages waiting to be filled. Then I looked out at that runway stretching into the distance and said something I'd learned the hard way. Respect is wealth no one can steal.